When you did some work for the Pentagon,
Mhm.
what type of DEI work was that? Did
You
you
know,
develop programs, or
we
how did it?
did.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did. We did work. Matter of fact, we were a very small team back in 2008 that I was incredibly fortunate to be a part of, and we were the Army Diversity Task Force, and we ended up standing up or developing the United States Army's first ever policy on diversity. And this is for, at the time, it was an organization of 1.4 million people, and we had an opportunity to help the most senior Army leadership understand the value of diversity and inclusion and equity, to the point that they created an entire, division, or I shouldn't say division, effort program for this, to include policy and marketing and competencies and another host of other things. And it was a big achievement. Not for me, it was a big achievement for the Army, because the military has to understand the value of diversity. They have to recruit from the population of the U.S. and elsewhere. You don't have to necessarily be a U.S. citizen to be in the military if you meet certain standards and criteria. So I think helping the Army understand the value of diversity, equity, inclusion was a big thing for the Army, for the American people.
And I remember talking to you before. Isn't it only about 15% of women that join the services, or is
Yeah,
that number changing?
Yeah, it's slowly growing over years. I want to say it's about 15, 16% if you look across, the Department of Defense, which includes the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Coast Guard, and the Marine Corps. And I think maybe the Marine Corps may have a little, maybe 14%, and maybe the Air Force about 17%, but it's about 15 or 16% versus 84, 85% male.
Is the feeling of belonging, is that what keeps a lot of women away from that opportunity?
I don't know. That's a good question. I served with a number of outstanding people, many of them women. Some of them, they were my peers. Some of them they worked for me. Some I worked for them. And I don't know if that keeps them away, or they may not understand the opportunities that do exist.
Right.
Every position that, unless something has changed recently that I'm unaware of, I think just about every position is open to women in the military, in the services. And it's a pretty amazing opportunity. Again, if you're not exposed to it, depends on, who are you surrounded yourself with, what does your family think, what are your interests in life? And, not everybody wants to go be in the military, and that's okay.
Well, that's true. We don't want anybody that doesn't want to go into it.
Yeah, then that's okay.
Because
That's fine. Yeah.
that's the closest bond I can think of. And I'm talking about mostly in the past, serving on a police force, or a fire department, in a fire department, or in the military. Those have, of course, traditionally been mostly men. But since it's been changing,
Mhm.
there are still cases of bullying. I still hear about that, from women who are in different positions
Sure.
within those fields. Can you tell me a story about how that might have been changed for someone that you knew?
You know, I don't know if I can think of a specific instance of that. I can think of instances where, one particular instance where it wasn't so much bullying, it was maybe an awakening of how to move forward
Okay.
with one's career. And there was a woman that I've known for many, many years now. And all she wanted to do when she was a young woman was just be in the Air Force. And she didn't care what she did. And so as soon as she was old enough, she ran down to the career center for the Air Force, and she joined. And they said, "What do you want to be?" And she goes, "I don't care." And they said, "Okay, we'll make you a cook." And we need cooks, and we have them in all the services. And she was very happy with that. And so she goes through, her basic training and her advanced individual training, and she becomes a cook in the Air Force, and she's working away. She's a young, airman at the time. And she's in a couple of years, and one of her sergeants approaches her one day as she's doing her daily tasks and said, you know, you're really pretty smart. You know, have you ever thought about becoming an officer? And she's, you know, she stopped, and as she tells the story, she says, you know, I never thought an officer. That's, you know, I couldn't be an officer, could I? And you know, long story short, she goes through the processes because somebody, you know, brought to her attention this idea that she could be something more than what she was currently, even though she was happy with it. And she ultimately became an officer in the United States Air Force, completed an entire career, and, you know, after the Air Force, became a PhD, and has gone on to do great and wonderful things with that. So I want to go back to the point about it really matters who you are surrounded with, who's caring for you, who is asking you those questions, who's pushing you in those directions,
who's feeding your self-worth.
Yes.
Doesn't that have to be a part of the training? Don't they have to, I mean, I am just recently certified as a neurolinguistics practitioner, and it deals with the brain and science and psychology, but obviously the subconscious. And so when you've been in positions of not having the equity that you need to have to think that you can even do something like what you're mentioning. Oh, I could be in management. I never even thought that I could do that. Oh, I could be an astronaut. Oh, whatever it might be, because I was a flight attendant for 7 years before I became a corporate trainer. But I also majored in college in marketing and things like that. So I was wondering, how do we let people know that the only way we can be authentic is to really dig deep and to figure out a lot of the things in our subconscious that are working against us? For instance, if you were bullied as a child, that carries through. And oftentimes you are still bullied, whether you're supposed to be bullied or not within an organization, but you are still bullied. And how do you move past that? Let's say it's weight, or let's say it is the color of your skin, or let's say it's your education or your socioeconomic background. How does that subconscious, how is that fed through training?
You know, that's a great question. And I can't tell you, I mean, I'm not trained in specifically the psychology of bullying. I can share, you know, service members that I have experienced that seem to be weighted down by imposter syndrome, as an example, right?
Okay.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes, I'd like
which
to hear about this.
which can affect men and women. I think based on the cursory bit of information that I've studied, you know, it probably affects more women than men, but it can both. But you're right, Ron. It goes back to, you know, who raises us, how are we treated? Are we, you know, the messages that we receive really matter. And so when we're told over and over, especially in our young formative years, you know, it's like the movie The Help. You is good, you is kind, you is important.
Oh my gosh.
That
you
is
just
an
mentioned my
amazing
favorite movie.
Yes.
And that little girl.
Yes.
That should be like everyone. Everyone should be required to see some of that if you go and work somewhere.
How brilliant is Viola Davis's character? And Viola Davis knows that's so important. And this is not even her child, to tell that little girl, you is kind, you is good, you is important, because the character knew how important it was because of who knows, right, the backstory of the character. But it's incredibly important that what we tell our children, what we tell each other.
And how we raise our children. And from the very young age,
yes.
You know, when I was going through, I've had 2 nonprofits, and one of them was Stop Child Abuse Theatrical Organization and Productions. And we produced theater to create funds and awareness for already existing programs like Children of the Night and Kids Peace. And Children of the Night was an organization that helped children from 40 years ago, I think, really be able to leave prostitution
Mm-hmm.
and to make something of their lives. And of course, uh, nearly all of them had
Mm-hmm.
suffered some kind of sexual abuse or at least
Right.
physical abuse or something
Right.
to that nature. But they had to start, I mean, at a very young age. What would cause a young person to run away? I mean, I ran away when I was 12.
Mm-hmm.
So what would cause a young person at 11 to leave Alabama and run to Hollywood and not be
Mm-hmm.
able to make the money to live on their own? And
Mm-hmm.
then half the time they get sent back home.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm talking about is when you have that kind of a background,
Right.
unfortunately, you learn a lot of manipulation techniques because you have to.
To
That's how you
survive.
survive.
Right.
So when these people want to work up, let's say in the military, and they have this kind of relationship building activity, they also have to take a look at victimhood, right? Because most of them have been victims. So they have to learn to choose not to stay a victim. And what would be something that you taught that would help them to move past? Yes, I was a victim. And first, all the grief, all the grieving stages that we go through. Denial, of course, being so strong. And I have 3 sisters, and I have one of them that will never come out of denial, that who our family was,
Right. Right.
to go forward. And so I'm just wondering, what was the best thing you did that was most satisfying to you,
Mm-hmm.
to help these people move past their lack of self-worth?
That's a great question. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking of the best leaders I ever had, because I'm going to give you the answer that I learned from them. And this is what I did.
Yeah.
So, no one ever asked me about the things that occurred to me, or anyone else around me. It was about what I mentioned a little while ago at the beginning of our conversation about, creating these inclusive environments, that
Mhm.
inclusive leaders do that. And so I think the best thing that I ever experienced were leaders who valued me, respected me, welcomed me, and listened to me. And
Listening.
that doesn't mean that they didn't allow me to do nothing. I worked hard, and they were demanding of the mission we had at hand. But I always knew that I was important. I was good. I was important. I was kind. Kind of going back to the helpline. But I mean, so it made me feel like, even though the bumps and scrapes and dents that I picked up along the way, I was still more than all the bad things that had happened to me. And so that made me feel good about myself. It made me feel good about my leadership, made me feel good about my other team members. And so when I was lucky enough to earn the rank of leader in the Army, I wanted to make sure that whoever was coming through the doorway into my team, metaphorically speaking, that young man or that young woman was, I welcomed them, I respected them, I would listen to them, I valued them. I wanted to make sure that I didn't care where they were from. You had met the standards of the organization. You were now a United States Army soldier, and you should be treated with dignity and respect. So I don't know if it's of a specific thing. It's more of a sense of just creating a culture, creating an environment where I'm glad you're here. And you're important to me as the leader, and you're important to this team. And I want to do whatever I can to try to make you as successful as you want to be on this team. Booker T. Washington, I love this quote. And for those who are not familiar, he was the president and dean, I believe, of the Tuskegee Institute for 30 years. And he said, you can use your power in one of 2 ways. You can hold people down, or you can help pull them up. And if you're in a leadership position, you have power. And what you do with that power really, really matters. So I think, Rhonda, it's to create that inclusive environment where you welcome, respect, value, and listen to people. If they make some mistakes and they get in trouble a little bit, you got to correct them a little bit. We understand sometimes you got to be a parent, but if you're a good parent, you also love your team members too. So
Oh, you hit the nail on the head.
yeah.
I mean, that is perfect, because I mean, what does non-judgmental mean? We all are judgmental to a
Sure, of
certain
course we are.
extent.
Yes.
Right. But to become as unbiased as possible, really the only way I can see it happening is if you have actual love for everyone you meet and respect for them, and the fact that they might not be at a certain place that you are at, to create that kind of levity. So that would be, your best practices. Is there anything else that you can think of as far as an organizational DEI best practice that you would like to share with most of our listeners?
Well, I would think that, there's a couple things. I mean, organizations that want to do as much as they can for, let's say, various groups of people: veterans, women, African American, Latinx, Asian, whatever, single mothers, LGBTQ. Employee resource groups is an example of a container that organizations can create and allow folks to come in, and anybody can come in, but it's focused on various groups of people, women as an example, to give women a place, a container, an environment where they can come around to discuss the things that are going well in the organization that they're in, or maybe the things that they could maybe need some help in the organization. And employee resource groups can be very, very helpful to those organizations that, goes back to being, to listening to your people. And so I would want to know what's the experience of women in my organization? What's it like to be a woman in company X? I want to know if I'm a leader that cares. I mean, we all know what the bottom line is, but I want to make sure you're an integral part of us producing whatever we produce here. And so I want to make sure you're healthy too. So ERGs can be a fantastic way for that to occur. Mentoring can be great.
Mentoring.
I mean,
yes. Who was your mentor? Who was your best mentor? Oh, you have many?
Yeah, you know what? I have one, and it happens to be a man, and his name is Bob Dills, and he's still around, and he was a senior leader of many, further down the road than I. And I think the reason that he comes to mind immediately, and I've had many, is he would really give me honest feedback. And sometimes it was not comfortable to hear it, but I knew based on how he led, the information he was sharing was for my own good. And I think that feedback thing is really, really important, especially the honest kind.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody likes to hear feedback that makes you feel warm and fuzzy and good, and not, when it's uncomfortable feedback and you don't want to hear about how you didn't do something well. That's not pleasant, but sometimes that's the best feedback you ever get. So I think mentoring is another very, very effective best practice that anyone can use.
Yeah,
really,
I don't
really
know
help out.
where I would be today if I didn't have my grandmother.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, she was a curator for the Southwest Indians, and she was the only one in Arizona that the different tribes would actually trade with her. So she learned different languages, and they trusted her. And that's the greatest thing that you can say about your friend Bob Dill, is that you trusted him to be honest, because I don't trust somebody who's always buttering me up. Oh, you this, you that, you're so fabulous, and you start thinking, well, I might just be a part of their rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a possibility.
In a people pleasing sense. And I used to be the biggest people pleaser in my youth, because I went through a lot of childhood abuses.
Right.
So, it makes a huge difference in how children are brought up that way. Now, do you have children?
I do. Yeah. I have a son. He's 31. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Oh, my son is 30.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I was reading through, you'll appreciate this. I was reading through Teen Vogue, and this was about a year ago, before COVID, when you could actually go places. And so this magazine was lying around where I was, and it talked about inclusion for young women, and it had words, your vocabulary that you should use to include others in your group. And they had things like y'all, which, you know, having lived in Texas, I get that. Friends, gang, team, folks. I don't know any young person that uses the word folks,
Mhm.
and not even a millennial. But anyway, they had that in there. People, members, everyone, committee. What, if any of those words, would you say would actually be the best words for the young millennials or even young kids, you know, that are growing up to start learning about inclusivity?
You know, that's a good question. And as simple as that question is, it does have some implications of how we talk to people. I'll share an experience that I had. I was working with a client in New York, and at the time, this is a few years ago, I would, you know, based on my military background, we used the term ladies and gentlemen when addressing a new crowd, right? Up until that point, that particular day that this occurrence happened, I had, you know, I'd never had any feedback to counter it. And after the training was done, a young woman came up to me and she said, "Do you think that the term ladies and gentlemen made everybody feel welcomed?" And I thought, well, I don't know. I assumed that it did. And she said, "Well, I am genderqueer, and I didn't feel um, I didn't feel included by you." And she wasn't attacking me, and she wasn't being, you know, combative. She was giving me honest feedback.
Yeah.
And her name is Celeste. And Celeste said, "You know, Greg, if you want to try to get, you know, better reactions, better inclusion, maybe you could use the term hello everybody, or welcome friends, or some kind of more inclusive, you know, terminology, because," she says, "you really limit it to, you are assuming that everybody here identifies as a lady or a gentleman." And it was such good counsel. And here was a young woman, I could easily have been her father, if maybe not her grandfather. But she was really, you know, saying, "Hey, I'm trying to help you out." So yes, I would say to millennials, to anybody out there that's trying to, you know, if you want to be more inclusive, if you want to make sure that you're not going to lose people in the audience, use those kinds of inclusive language, or that's going to encapsulate, or, you know, bring folks together. If we're saying, "Hey guys, what's going on?" You know, that may not affect me in a way. Even if I've had women who said that doesn't bother them. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't know everybody in the audience. There may be people in the audience that, you know, that didn't fall on them the way it did for me. So be as inclusive as you can with your the way you address your crowds or your audiences, or the people, you know, you encounter. You know, a good way when you're meeting somebody for the first time and you're establishing some rapport and you're establishing, you know, a new work relationship, you know, how do they want to be treated? You know, the golden rule is treat people like you want to be treated. That is the
Right.
golden rule. The platinum rule is treat people as they want to be treated, you know?
That is so profound. I'm so thankful for that. Is that the last thing that you would like to leave with our audience today?
The last thing I would like to leave with the audience today is find those inclusive leaders and environments that you can thrive and grow and develop in. And if you're not in one of those right now, and I hope that you are, but if you're not in one of those, keep your eyes and ears open.